It's usually pretty clear when someone is stealing. At the mall, if you walk out with a new shirt and don't pay, chances are you'll set off an alarm. But in the world of art, nothing is that black and white. For example, songwriters have been borrowing musical elements and lyrical ideas from each other's work probably since the very first songs were written.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me.
I dreamed I saw St. Augustine, alive as you or me.
Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it.
No artist exists in a vacuum. Musicians, painters, and filmmakers are influenced by the work that came before them. So when is an artist paying tribute to a mentor's work, and when is that artist stealing someone's ideas? When does it cross the line from mere influence to theft? I'm David Furst. As part of our series, Homage or Theft, we try to answer that question. This time we venture into the world of film sound design, the use of signature sounds, and something called the Wilhelm Scream. Copyright law is confusing enough when it comes to music, but what about sound? Doesn't one explosion pretty much sound just like another? Well, some sounds are so singular and so identified with a particular character or object that nearly everyone knows what it is within seconds. Whether it's the video game Pac-Man, Scooby-Doo's laugh, or a lightsaber from Star Wars. Some of these sounds are legally protected, and some are not, but most of them represent the work of talented artists and sound designers. So, does anyone get upset when a sound created for a particular film starts popping up in lots of other movies? It happens more often than you might think. Here's one famous example. What do the movies Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars, Toy Story, and dozens of others all have in common? Yeah, lots of them are action movies and full of amazing special effects, but there's something else. A signature sound that, if you listen close enough, is used in every one of these movies. No, it's not the laser guns or the explosions, it's the Wilhelm Scream.
Hi, I'm Steve Lee. I'm a sound effects wrangler, a Hollywood historian, and I run the website hollywoodlostandfound.net. The Wilhelm Scream is a sound effect that was recorded in 1951 for a film called Distant Drums. It was a Gary Cooper movie. And they needed the sound for a man being bitten by an alligator and being dragged underwater. One of the actors in the film, and we believe it was Sheb Woolley, came in and did this scream that was used in the film, and it was archived away in the Warner Brothers sound effects library. This collection is used for many, many different films. And so that scream that he performed for that film got used in so many different films and westerns under the Warner Brothers banner. And then cut to 1976 when Ben Burtt is researching Star Wars.
I'm Ben Burtt, and I'm a sound designer for motion pictures. Selecting sounds to go in a movie or inventing sounds is really a process in which you try to not just technically get a good recording of something that's clear and high quality, but perhaps more importantly, what you're after is picking the right sound for the right moment in a film to deliver the most dramatic enhancement to the movie.
Luke. The sound effects design that he was doing for Star Wars. He was making all these wonderful laser guns and lightsabers and all the wonderful things that you hear in the Star Wars film. And he was doing research at all the different studios, and he actually tracked down this scream that he remembered as a kid, watching all these westerns. He actually tracked down the master of the sound at Warner Brothers and started using this sound as sort of his own personal sound signature. He started using it in all the films he worked on, just sort of as a little in-joke and a little sort of signature of his own. It's in all the Star Wars films. It's in all the Indiana Jones films. So far, there's over 200 films that it's appeared in.
I didn't know it was called the Wilhelm. I just recognized it when I heard it as a canned sound effect from old movies.
Sound designer Mark Mangini worked on movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Gremlins, The Lion King, and Anchorman.
Early sound editors would have to reuse the same sound over and over and over again. Unlike today, where I've got 500 different kinds of German Shepherd barks, you'd be lucky if you had one good sound of a man screaming while dying, and that's the sound of a Wilhelm.
He wanted to get in on the Wilhelm joke, too.
We saw that Ben was onto something. We loved the idea of an inside sound joke. And we thought, let's perpetuate this little inside joke just amongst ourselves. So Ben continued to do it on his films, and we, Richard Anderson, Stephen Flick, and I, perpetuated it in all the films that we did for decades. And for all I knew, we were the only ones doing it. It was our inside joke, and only shared amongst us for decades before it got outed.
But why the name Wilhelm Scream? Who's Wilhelm?
One of the films that it was used in after Distant Drums, in 1953 actually, was a film called Charge at Feather River. There was a character named Private Wilhelm, and he gets hit in the leg with an arrow and lets out this scream. And I think it's the first time an actual character with a name let out this scream.
Wilhelm! Yeah, I'll just fill my pipe.
And Ben sort of imprinted on that and he nicknamed it for himself generally, I think, in the beginning, Wilhelm.
So, okay, Wilhelm Scream, it's a great Hollywood insider story that's taken on near mythic status, but the question remains, when a signature sound is used in another film and it's not part of a sound effects library that you're paying for, is that stealing?
It's open to interpretation, I believe, really. I mean, sound editors have been borrowing sound effects since post-sound began, really. I mean, you look back at some early cartoons and you hear a lot of the same sound effects. People moved from studio to studio looking for work and sort of brought their own little collections. And it's still the case today. People trade sound effects. I worked for many years as a sound effects librarian, and I had sort of a little network of the other librarians, and we would trade sounds much like you would go to the neighbor's house and, borrow a cup of sugar. I need some really good thunder, or I need a really fast car series for this car in the film. And if you don't have time to go out and record something and you just need a few things, that's one way to go. That's one avenue to proceed. In the case of Wilhelm, it's an old effect. It's been around for a long time. And it's sort of considered fair game because it's one of those old classic stocky effects, much like the thunderclap in the original Frankenstein, 1931. It's in practically every sound effects house you can find.
Great food starts with fresh ingredients.
But Mark Mangini says nothing compares to doing your own original work.
You can't create a signature dish without going to the market and hand-picking the most interesting and appropriate and freshest ingredients. Canned food won't work for a great dining experience. The same is absolutely true with great sound work. The films that are recognized for great sound in the form of Oscars and critical acclaim are known for their fresh approach to sound work. They are not works made from sound libraries.
He gets testy when the subject of borrowing sound comes up.
There is a lack of respect for artistic integrity in the community because the ability to copy sounds digitally is so simple and can be so clandestine. It's very easy to copy an original work, either brazenly by stealing it right off of a CD soundtrack or by being in the employ or proximity of those who are creating these sounds. I know sound professionals who have envied interesting and creative sound work on a film and stolen it right off the DVD.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's beyond uncool. It's maddening and enraging because there's an economic factor at work here that goes kind of like this. I am employed because of my unique creative and artistic skills, among other things. and those have a cost attributed to them. When someone steals my work and attributes it to themselves, they steal work from me, because work now may migrate to that individual on the basis of improperly inherited sound work.
Uncool though it may be, it can be tough to prove in a court of law that someone stole your sound effects.
Part of the difficulty is the inability for us to accurately describe and notate what that sound is. In music, the relationships of tonalities is fairly easy to document. You can say that's a C sharp, it's a half note followed by a D, and it's in the key of E minor. And we can fairly easily define music, but it's very difficult to come up with language for sound.
But Steve Lee says the viewing public is pretty savvy, especially when it comes to signature sounds. He says people know when they're hearing stolen work.
It would really make a difference if it were a signature sound, I think. The signature sounds like Ben Burtt's work in Star Wars, like the lightsaber, or the Star Trek sound effects made by Doug Grindstaff and others at Paramount at the time. They really have such a distinctiveness specific to that show that if you were to use it in another context, there's so many fans out there who know the material that would say, hey, that's the tricorder from Star Trek. What is it in this other film? It doesn't work. It brings you out of it. So it's really in a lot of sound designers' best interest to create something new. Something that's so signature that was made specifically, like R2-D2's voice in the Star Wars films. You hear that and you know exactly that's R2-D2. If you hear it for another robot or another computer in another movie, you're going to no, that's R2-D2. That's cheating.
Fans might call it cheating. The legal department at Lucasfilm calls it something else. And it has the clout and the money to successfully protect its signature work. Meanwhile, when it comes to the Wilhelm, sound designer Ben Burtt has moved on. It's not a private little joke anymore. The cat's out of the bag in a big way on the Wilhelm Scream. But don't worry, with or without Ben Burtt, the Scream has taken on a life of its own. So don't be surprised if, during a fight scene at the multiplex, you suddenly hear a very familiar sound. And then you'll know Wilhelm is very much alive. I'm David Furst for Arts Edge, a program of the Education Department of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Excuse me.